I'm not sure you've heard, but we live in an age of connectivity, and that includes people over the age of 50. Because tonight I'm talking some American lit with an old friend, a mentor, but simply put, Professor Blake is in the house. Doctor, how have you been?
I've been okay. It's an honor to be here with one of my all-time favorite students.
Did you say honor? What's your Venmo again? um, well, you were a young hotshot yourself once. Were you not a young professor? The youngest professor?
Yeah, I was a young hotshot back in my day, and youth is wasted on the young, as they say, because I feel like I'm doing the same stuff, but it just doesn't resonate anymore like it used to in those days. At least that's my nostalgic way of looking back on it.
Hmm. Well, I may look like Barbara Walters, but don't start crying yet. Um, how did we become friends along the way? I did take a class of yours, and I was rebellious at the time, was I not?
You were, and I remember one thing you said to me, and I still share this quote from you every semester, believe it or not. When I teach an intro to lit class, and we talk about how reading real literature is harder, actually, and not always fun, but it's an acquired taste, and sometimes you have to read things a couple of times, and a little bit of training helps. And I said, like this one guy that took my American Lit survey class, I used to play basketball with him, and he took the class. And after the class, he said, one thing came out of that. I don't like my Star Wars books anymore. And I said, well, then I've done my job.
Well, let's put an end to that chatter right now. Just joking. You wait your turn. Well, Star Wars has become something of pop culture, and I'm sure we'll burn that up a different day. But let's get formal. PhD in interdisciplinary studies, American Lit, and American history. Is that right?
That's right.
How does that play? How does that marriage go together these days?
Well, I wrote my dissertation on a book called Elmer Gantry, which everybody ought to read. It's a book about a phony preacher, and is written by Sinclair Lewis, who was kind of a hack. He wasn't like a Hemingway or a Fitzgerald, but he did sell more books than either one of those guys in the 20s. He wrote Main Street. Yeah. He had a lot of big hits: Main Street, Babbitt, Aerosmith, Elmer Gantry. But Elmer Gantry was his preacher novel. And he wanted to expose preachers for the phonies that he believed them to be. And he did all the research for that novel in Kansas City in 1927. And so for my dissertation, I went back and dug up everything I could find on those ministers, 5 or 6 different ministers that he met with to write that book, to see what kind of characters that they were. So I combined a little bit of Kansas City history and, literature, historical approach to literature.
Would you consider yourself one of the Midwest's best detectives, lit detectives?
I consider myself the preeminent expert on the book Elmer Gantry, and oddly enough, nobody cares about that. It's gotten, if I take that and $3, I can get myself a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and that's about as far as it goes.
Well, hashtags do travel. We'll test those words. Well, before we dig into lit, let's talk basketball game for a second. All right. You've been on a couple courts along the way. Let's start out our first tour at Mid-America. I had wraparound passes for days. We know that. But how would you describe your game along the way? Early Tyler Blake. What's your moves?
Well, I had no game, as you know, and I never played organized basketball. So I thought the only thing you're supposed to do is, dribble around a lot and make as many baskets as you can. I had no concept of setting screens or any of that stuff. So, you guys had to teach me that along the way, and I appreciate all your help. But I did find out the other day. Tell me if you know this, Curtis. You remember Josh Milkowski, the Milkster?
Oh yeah.
And Wes and all those guys that were on the JV squad, and they used to show up and play with us. He said you had he said you had a nickname back then, and I said I had a nickname. He said, yeah, we never told you. And I was like, do you know what my nickname was?
I don't, but I'm here for it.
He said, we called you Stovetop because we're always stuffing your shot.
That's like, it sounds nice up front, but yeah, that's no bueno.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder where those guys turned up or no?
Yeah, I had breakfast with Josh the other day, and they're all kind of still around. You remember that guy Jason that just all he wanted to do is live for basketball, and he would always bring his ladies out to watch him play pickup ball.
I have no recollection of that, of course. Yeah, of course I do, Doc. Of course. Hold on, let's keep it tight. Strictly moves early on. What's your go-to? Is it a layup? Is it a jump shot,
yeah.
baseline?
Well, I developed this after you and I played, I think, because of that whole stove top stuffing thing. I did get my shot blocked a lot, and so my go-to move, I like to post up even though I'm not that big, and turn and fake, and then go the old dippity do.
All right. It seems fairly descriptive.
Well, if you're playing with a young guy, they're always going to go for the fake because they love to block shots. Especially if you let them block a couple early on, then they're always going to go for that fake, and then you got an easy layup.
After Mid-America Nazarene College at the time, you went to College of the Ozarks, which has a nickname as well, does it not?
Yeah, Hard Work U.
Wait, how's that come about?
Well, the students work for their tuition there. You have to work 15 hours a week, and if you do that, they pay for your tuition. So it's pretty nice. But they really don't. They don't work that hard, to be honest, from what I saw.
I was going to ask you about that, if there was a quality of workmanship or classroom compared to Mid-America.
Yeah, it wasn't as much fun as Mid-America overall. It felt like the students were maybe a little more serious, but weren't as comfortable, in that kind of setting, I guess I would say. The school systems down there aren't as good that fed the college. And so I missed the students, in the Kansas City area. A little more sophisticated, urbane, I would say, overall, like yourself.
Don't let the folks in Arkansas hear you say that. You found your way back to Mid-America Nazarene, which is in a suburb of Kansas City known as Olathe, if you're in the house. Cheers, guys. How has it been to come back home?
It was nice. Yeah, I was really, I kind of wanted to come back as soon as I left because it's just a nice place. And, they always say you don't know what you have until it's gone. And that's how I felt about being in this area. So I was glad to get back. And
good man.
Yeah.
Shall we talk some American Lit?
Yeah, that sounds great.
I don't know if you've heard, but the War of the Sexes on, and I believe it's Women's Celebration Month. Now, you have taught a class in Women's Lit Studies, have you not?
Yeah, I have. I tried a couple times.
Well, who's a female author, American Lit author that comes to mind up front for you? One that has good with words, maybe.
I really like Kate Chopin. She wrote in the late 1800s. She was a naturalist writer like Jack London. She wrote a great book called The Awakening about a lady who has an affair and then drowns herself. So I like her a lot. But probably Flannery O'Connor is my favorite. And she wrote some of the greatest short stories ever, like Parker's Back, and she wrote a couple of novels, Wise Blood, and so she's my all-time favorite female writer.
Decent. Did you find the early 19th century to be like a hotbed for literature?
Yeah, the really, I think American literature takes off in the mid 19th century. That's when you get the romantics like Nathaniel Hawthorne and Herman Melville, Walt Whitman, Emerson, all those guys. the kind of the transcendentalists in the 1850s, and then it surges again near the end with the naturalists like Jack London, White Fang, and Stephen Crane. You know, Red Badge of Courage, and
Making
then
It Rain.
yeah, and I think the last great era was the Jazz Age of the 20s, and that's when you get Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Faulkner, and then I don't know. To me, it hasn't been the same since.
It's the season to talk like that. I think we had mentioned 3 authors we were going to bring into focus a little bit. Let's save the best for last. You know who that is. Let's start out with one J. Mcinerney, who once upon a time wrote a book called Bright Lights, Big City, which did capture our attention, did it not?
It did. Yeah, that's one of my. If anybody asks for a book, and you know, people sometimes ask me for something to read, I'll always recommend Bright Lights, Big City, because it's so smart and witty, but it's also, you know, layered with symbolism, like I think all great literature has to be in order to qualify as great literature.
I often
So
see it get dismissed as just kind of like an 80s Coke novel, but
yeah.
I don't know. Did the age of choose your own adventure books, did that get to you, that second person writing? Did that ever hit?
You know, I think because I am a male reader, it resonated with me because it never bothered me ever. Yeah, the whole thing is written in second person. You know, it starts off saying, "You are not the kind of person who should be in a place like this," and yet here you
Right.
are.
Mhm.
And yeah, and he's in a club, and he's hopped up on cocaine, the Bolivian marching powder, and he's looking for more of the Bolivian marching powder, and he's lost his girlfriend. And man, it worked for me. And I never read those choose your own adventure books. I read them to my kids a little bit, but yeah, it was an experiment with the second person, and it gets strange sometimes, but I thought it worked.
I don't know. I haven't looked back at the choose your own adventure novels. I feel like when the first wide distribution hit, whether it was like in the 80s, you know, the VHS, wide publishing, stuff like that, I feel like a lot of creatives were put in play at that time. The choose your own adventure books got so heavy that the writer, I think it's RJ, and maybe RJ Montgomery, something like that. He writes himself into the book. He's like, I didn't get time to write about the 6th dimension, so go ahead and imagine it at the end. So just kind of like, you're just like, as a kid, you're like, well, what? Do you think that Mcinerney ultimately is a one-trick pony, literature-wise? Not to
Yeah,
start any fires.
I do think that, and I've tried to read so many. I think I've tried to read all of his other books, and a couple of them I thought at first this might be almost as good as Bright Lights Big City, but then it just sort of fell off a cliff. He had one just I think about 5 or 6 years ago that I was excited about, but man, it didn't work for me.
Well, I feel like if you were talking TV, you'd be talking about True Detective right now, because the first part of that first season was so strong, and everything just fell apart.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you catch that, by the way, or was that too?
yeah. It started out with was it Colin Farrell and Matthew McConaughey or something like that?
Close enough for me. Yeah, they had the exposition going. Of course, Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So Mcinerney in the sack. What about F. Scott Fitzgerald? Honestly, when I think about him, I just think about those big eyes from Gatsby. What do you think?
yeah, and the green light at the end of the dock.
Mm.
Yeah,
What do you?
and you know, I'm one of the few people who I think of him as kind of a one-hit wonder too. You know, I've tried to read Tender as the Night and some of his other novels, but none come close to Gatsby.
Well, aside from like we'll talk about some of Hemingway's stuff, and we mentioned the wit of Mcinerney. What rings or resonates about Fitzgerald's work to you? Like, was he a wordsmith, or how'd it go?
Yeah, I think he was a great wordsmith, and he kind of wrote in an old-fashioned style. And The Great Gatsby didn't do well when he wrote it. You know, it was a time of more experimental fiction, and Hemingway had changed writing and made the style more minimal. And so people didn't appreciate Fitzgerald's evocative, kind of emotional, more long-winded style, and the book didn't seem to have a plot, which people still try to say that it doesn't. But a lot of people don't realize that that book was not that popular, and when Fitzgerald died, he felt like it was a failure. But in World War II, for some reason, the U.S. government bought a bunch of copies of that and passed them out to the troops overseas, and that brought it back. They came home and told everybody about it, and it took off again. But I just think it's poignant and layered with meanings and symbols, and there's just something about a guy who will do anything he can to get back with this girl, even though she's married, and so he tries to get rich. It's the American dream, you know. He tries to make all this money so she'll accept him, and it doesn't work out. But you like the way he tries.
Did you have anything? Did you caught the movie, right? The new one?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about it? Did you feel like it was a good translation?
Yeah, I think it's the best. I taught it in a film class, and in this film class, it's fun to look at several different versions of Gatsby. Man, I think that thing's been made into a movie at least 9 times. The first one was in the 20s, and
well, that is some trivia right there.
Yeah, I think he was even going to be in one of them. Scott Fitzgerald was, and it didn't work out or something. I forget what happened, but I think this last one, directed by what's that guy's name? He also directed Moulin Rouge. I'll think of it in a minute, but I think
let me save you. I think before that set was going to be, for you video game fans out there, before that set was going to be Gatsby, it was going to be BioShock. So they were going to put that set underwater. Missed opportunities.
Really? How about that?
But yeah, let's see. And finally, we have a character they call Papa Hemingway. I think most people know about his pop culture ending. In this age of all the world being a stage, do you think he went out at that time, or do you think he did theater to soak in the adoration, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think he did what he loved, and
you see him as a real one, right?
Yeah, I do. And you talk to people who knew him personally, or you read about, different people who met him, and they say he wasn't like you think, that he was pretty soft-spoken and, easy to be around for the most part, and, even fairly humble, some people say. But I just think he grew up loving to hunt and fish, and he did that all his life, and he was always searching for adventure, partly because I think he wrote what he lived. He didn't have like a huge imagination where he could create fantasy novels in another galaxy. He wrote what happened to him and changed the names. And
so I heard that. Yeah. Well, sometimes when I'm looking back, some writers paint a scene. There's a scene that resonates, maybe a character. When you're looking back at Hemingway's work, is it a scene? What is it that you remember about his writing?
Yeah, he kind of invented a code, almost like a religion, where all of his characters were under pressure. They all, many of them came back from the war, and so their response was a real stoic response to it, and they try not to talk about it, try not to whine about it. If you can, try not to even think about it, but just keep a stiff upper lip and keep that grace under pressure. And I admire that, because it's so easy to whine about my situation. It's always easy to do that. And I think he modeled that kind of masculinity of just try to tough it out,
Well, apparently it didn't play out so well. All right, that's fair. I think my most memorable Hemingway scene, not to be irreverent, I think my most memorable Hemingway scene was maybe The Sun Also Rises. Is that when they get caught in that foxhole and he describes a grenade going off like an oven opening? I don't know if it was that book.
No, that's Farewell to Arms.
Good one.
That was Farewell to Arms. Yeah, that is a great scene. They're just they're in the foxhole eating some spaghetti and cheese, and then all of a sudden he hears a noise, and it's like he feels himself going out of his body, and he comes back in and wakes up, and everything exploded all around him. That's a good one.
I know you've stacked some awards. Do you feel like you're going to get on the page? Oh, I've seen your awards. I've seen your online bio. No, do you think you're going to get on the page? Do you feel like there's maybe a book in you, or how's that?
I've written a couple of novels, but neither one of them were very good. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get back into it one of these days. But it's hard work, and I second guess myself. So it's. Yeah, we'll see. My son is writing a novel, and he's published a couple of stories, so that'll be enough for me. And my daughter has also written a couple of novels, so
Shout out to Turner, peeps.
Yeah, Turner and Amanda. You remember Amanda down there in the basement?
Good stuff. I do. We have a history, folks. We've not had one person join, but that just shows you the strength of this conversation. We don't need an audience, Doc.
Not one.
No, but here's how it goes. It uploads to YouTube. Listen up, kids, and then I'll promote it in post. So they'll see your smiling visage. It's all good, Doc.
All right. All right.
Give me a couple of contemporary writers that you've enjoyed along the way.
Let's see. I really like Gone Girl by oh, now I can't think of the name. I didn't know you were going to ask me this. And then you would like this book, Curtis, House of Sand and Fog.
Oh, I read that. I read that back in the day with you.
Oh yeah, it's great stuff.
That's not that contemporary.
Yeah, that's not that contemporary. Neither is Gone Girl. I think it was 2005 or something. But yeah, I'm not as good on the contemporaries. Being an old lit runner.
We're at 22 minutes and a half right now. Let's go for an even 25. That gives you some shout outs. But we do have to wrap. I know you've at least read one comic book. Just in one sentence, you've seen the Black Book along the way. What did you see when you opened it up?
Oh, the Black Book, man. That's a tour de force right there. And yeah, never saw a comic like that one before. And I was raised on the comics. Man, Spider-Man. That was my nickname in 6th grade. I was so obsessed. And I drew those. We're
gonna have to cover your comic reading in the sequel.
Okay, that'll be the sequel.
Send some shout outs. Let's invite somebody for our next chat. Who do we need to have in here aside from yourself and me?
Did you know Phil White, this British guy? He played soccer and basketball. I think he was after you quite a bit, but he's written 5 or 6 books. He's a real smart guy that went to your college.
Well, we're not doing our job unless we further the name of Mid-American Nazarene University. Phil? Is that his name, Phil?
Phil White.
Phil White, you're on notice. This will find you. Let's chat it up, brother. Cheers. Dr. Blake, do you have anything coming up that you want to mention? Anything like that?
I'm actually doing an interview tomorrow about Hemingway for the Christian County Library down there in Nixon, Missouri. So I'm sure that will have way more viewers than this does.
Hey, it's VIPs only, Doc. You know how it is.
We expect to have 3, maybe 4 viewers of that.
Nice. Well, I'm sure we'll have some crossover viewing there because, all my viewers enjoy that. Doc, this is always an experiment. It's my 3rd live stream. And you know what? It's good to chat you up.
Well, it's great to chat with you. It's appreciate you having me on here.
You got it, brother. And you know what? In post, this is going to look pretty radical. Okay. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.